Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to be talking about New Jerusalem, the actual city, the center place that is planned for Independence, Missouri, Jackson County. In the last video, if you didn't catch it, there's been somewhat of a debate whether the center place is still in Independence. And from what I can tell, it is. There's nothing stating that it's not. Some have thought that maybe it's been moved to Salt Lake City, but there are plenty of recent modern statements that indicate otherwise. So, um, as I was preparing for the next video that I'm going to do after this, I came across not only those a few new quotes that I did in the last video, but also a lot more information about the layout of the city than I knew was available. Now, I was already aware about the two plats, right? The two city plats or the two plans. The one that we're looking at right now, this is the revised plat. So, had everything gone the way it should have gone, if the saints would have been prepared and righteous, they would have moved forward with this plan right here, right? With 24 temples in the middle. And we knew about this one too. This is the original one. It was smaller, as you can see if you look at the city blocks around here. The revised became larger than the original plan. Okay, so we already knew about this. I've talked about this quite a bit on the channel. I didn't think that there was much more to really discuss, but I guess there is. We've talked about what these temples are supposed to look like. This is on the Interpreter Foundation website. I tried to go to the original source, which I'll put in the links below in the description box. But in order to get a copy of that, you have to actually go to the Church History Library in person and request a viewing of it, I guess. So there's these two right here, this one and this one. But the Interpreter Foundation already did it. They put it in this article. This article, I would encourage you to read it. It's called The Past and Future of the Temple Law in Independence, Jackson County, Missouri. It has a wealth of information, including not only this, what the temples are supposed to look like, and I'm assuming that they would move forward with this plan. I guess it could change, but essentially the temples would look somewhat like the Kirtland Temple. But we also learn later the significance of the Independence Visitor Center right here. It's not just a visitor center. They built this in order to keep the land because the city of Independence was looking at taking the land away through eminent domain. So they were like, no, okay, no, we're going to use it. We're going to use the land. We're going to build a visitor center there. And I'm not going to read it for the 5 billionth time, but you can read it here. This talks about Alvin R. Dyer and the architect consulting with David O. McKay, and they planned this, okay, so that it could be part of the 24 temple complex. They tried to figure out which building would this be, presumably, how it needed to be situated, and they built it according to the specifications that Joseph Smith received through Revelation. And it talks about that right here, 61 feet by 87 feet. So this temple, it's not a temple yet, but the structure is there, and it's ready to go. At any time that the Lord commands, this can be turned into one of those temples. A lot of times, I feel like it's kind of deceiving because when you read different quotes, it talks about the great temple of New Jerusalem as though there's just one and it's going to be like big or massive. But the reality, unless something changes, and I don't think that it is, just based on them making the visitor center so it could be part of the complex, it seems like that's going to be the case. That it's still planned to be a 24 temple complex. So we're going to be looking at a few different things. It turns out, I didn't know until now, that these temples actually have names. And I knew that they had different purposes. These aren't temples where you would go and do like the regular stuff that we do in temples necessarily. Maybe one or two of them would, I'm not sure. Um, but they would be for different purposes. Half of them are for the Melchizedek priesthood, the other half are for the Aaronic priesthood, which is something that we don't really have right now, in the sense that, like, there's not like set apart temples that are just for the Aaronic priesthood. You get what I'm saying? So, anyway, I made a spreadsheet so you can reference at any time, and I put down the names of all these temples. Okay, we're going to go over this in detail in just a little bit. We're going to take a look at Salt Lake City. We're going to look at Independence. We're going to look at Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so first I want to start with this. This is from Orson Pratt. Um, let's see. This was, delivered in the Tabernacle, Logan City, in 1879. Utah was not yet a state, but the saints were there. This is what he says. He says, I expect when that time comes that man will understand all the particulars in regard to the temple to be built in Jackson County. See, here he's talking about the temple, but hold on. Indeed, we have already a part of the plan revealed, and also the Plat explaining how the city of Zion is to be laid off, which may be found commencing on page 438, volume 14 of the Millennial Star. If you don't know what the Millennial Star was, it was a magazine produced by the church, and I think it was actually in the UK that it was published, if I'm not mistaken. So I looked this article up. We're going to read it. Okay. Well, excuse me, before we get too far, I should explain for anyone that's new to the church or doesn't really know the history of this area. They laid the cornerstones for the first temple, and it's right here. Okay. This little piece of land right here. This is where the cornerstones were laid for the first temple that was supposed to be constructed. Right now, this piece of land is owned by this tiny little church called Church of Christ Temple Lot. In fact, let's see. The Church of Christ Temple Lot. They are a teeny tiny little church. They only have 7,310 members, according to this Wikipedia article, which I have many videos that have gotten more views than they have members of their church. And yet they somehow exist and they own this land. And that's fine. There have been attempts made to purchase it from them, but they're not willing to sell it. As recently as 2018, early in the channel, I found an article where the local news here was talking to one of their, I don't know, I can't remember, an apostle, I believe, about purchasing the land. And they're like, nope, it's not a matter of money. So they, as of right now, they're like really intent on keeping that land. But anyway, so that's where the first temple would have been. And as far as I know, that's still the plan. Whenever this opens up, whenever the time comes, the first temple will be built there. And then the visitor center will become part of the 24 temple complex. I did look at something, though, a possibility. It seems like the church, from what I can tell, owns all this land right here. Okay, the reason why I say that is because there's like this, church symbol right here with Angel Moroni. It's called Kansas City, Kansas Facilities Maintenance Group. So I don't know. These buildings, I don't know. They belong to the city. I'm not sure. I don't really know. But we have this stake center, and there's this parking lot, and then we have this parking lot for the visitor center. I did a video where, using Photoshop, I copied and pasted the visitor center into a grid. And with the land that the church currently owns, they could make a 24 temple complex. Now, it's not really that simple. They'd have to coordinate with the city and figure things out. And it's not clear whether that would even be allowed, because the Lord uh, may insist that that first temple is supposed to be built where the cornerstones were originally laid. But I still did this thought experiment, and as you can see, it seems like there's enough room if you got rid of the stake center um, to create the 24 temple complex. Okay, so I'll put the link for this video in the description below in case you want to check that out. There's more that I talk about in here. But anyway, returning to what Orson Pratt was saying. Okay, he says, from what has been revealed of this temple to be erected, we can readily perceive that it will differ from anything that we have had. It will differ in regard to the number of rooms. It will differ very much in its outward and also its inward form. And it will differ in regard to the duties to be performed in each of its rooms to be occupied by the respective departments of priesthood. This house will be reared, then, according to a certain plan which God is to make known to his servants, whom he will, in his own due time, raise up. And he will have to give more revelation on other things equally as important, for we shall need instructions how to build up Zion, how to establish the center city, how to lay off the streets, the kind of ornamental trees to adorn the sidewalks, which is interesting that he's expecting revelation for that, which I don't know, maybe the Lord will want specific trees. I don't know, as well as everything else by way of beautifying it and making it a city of perfection, as David prophetically calls it. And then he cites a couple different scriptures. Psalms 48, verse 2. Beautiful for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. Psalms 50, verse 2. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God hath shined. Lamentations 2:15. All that pass by clap their hands at thee. They hiss and wag their heads at the daughter of Jerusalem, saying, is this the city that men will call the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? Now, I'm assuming that he is correctly citing these scriptures and that they're not in reference to the old Jerusalem. I haven't gone that far into it, but I'm going to assume that he cited these correctly. And this is pretty fitting right now because in the last video we were talking about how Independence is basically a crime-ridden area. It's not that great of a place to be in or to live in, I guess, from people I've talked to. All right, continuing. And then God will come and visit it. It will be a place where he will have his throne, where he will sit occasionally as King of Kings and Lord of Lords and reign over his people, who will occupy this great western continent, the same as he will have his throne at Jerusalem. Quote, beauty for situation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great king. And again, he says, okay, I'm not going to read that because we just read it. Does the psalmist mean that God will shine literally out of Zion? Yes, with light that will be seen by the righteous and the wicked also. Okay, so that's really interesting. Now, let's go ahead and check out that Millennial Star article that he was referring to. And it's really weird because here, okay, so starting in this paragraph here, this is where we're going to start reading, okay? But before that, it's talking about something completely different. It says, there was also corroborating testimony brought against him by Brother Hodges. The council cut him off from the church. The names of the temples to be built on the painted squares. I don't know. Maybe I didn't read I didn't read the whole thing for context. Maybe it makes sense, but it just feels like that's a really abrupt cut from one subject to another. Anyway, okay. Now, like I said, you don't need to remember this. I have it all right here. Okay. So if it's not clear, using Excel, I did a little grid. So pretend that these are the temples, 1 through 24. So starting at the bottom left, that's temple number 1, and then 2 and 3. And I know that because of this. Okay, going to the Joseph Smith papers, you see the Plat. And so number 1 is in the southwest corner, and number 24 is in the northeast corner. This complex is broken up into 2. So you have 12 in this city block, and then you have 12 in the eastern city block. Okay? Okay, so the names of the temples to be built on the painted squares as represented on the plot of the city of Zion, which is now about to be forwarded thither. Numbers, and I don't know why it starts in this order. Let's see. Well, I guess it makes sense. No, it makes sense. I know why. Okay, never mind. Okay, so numbers 10, 11, and 12 are to be called House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, which is after the order of the Son of God, upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. Okay, so that's, well, what it says here, this is what it's to be called. So I don't know. I guess that's like the name or how they refer to it. I don't know if it's like an official name because it seems like a pretty long name, or if they're just talking in a more loose sense. Like, okay, this is what this is. And notice that in this case, they're naming these 3 together rather than individually. So let's go to my spreadsheet. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. So we're looking at, excuse me. Okay, that's probably too zoomed in. Okay. So again, we're talking about these ones right here in the blue. So this one is called House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood. And see, what I don't know is if that is an official name, if it cuts off right there, and then this last part is just kind of like a description of what it's supposed to be. So for all I know, it's House of the Lord for the presidency of the high and most holy priesthood, and then that's it. And then the description is after the order of Melchizedek. And by the way, I wrote this down exactly how it appears in the Millennial Star. So that's why I spelled Melchizedek this way, because that's how it shows up in the Millennial Star. So the description may be after the order of Melchizedek, which was after the order of the Son of God upon Mount Zion, city of the New Jerusalem. I don't know. If you know, let me know. But I just put the whole thing there as though it's the full name. Okay. I have no idea. Okay. So he starts by naming these 3. These 3 seem to be the principal temples, like the presiding ones, because all the other ones have to do with lower priesthood offices. Okay. So 10, 11, and 12. The road would be right here. That divides the 2 city blocks. Okay. So it's kind of weird. And I'm assuming I can't really tell. Well, maybe this is why they drew it like this, because it looks like you see how these temples are drawn sideways, as though what's happening is they're facing east, which would make sense. They're facing east. So the principal temples seem to be 10, 11, and 12. So they're like the innermost temples, essentially. Well, you have these 6 right here. But on the Melchizedek priesthood side, which is the west side, the ones that are closest to the east are the principal temples. Now, that's kind of interesting because when we look at Salt Lake City, many people have pointed out that Temple Square and the church office building block is almost like a complex. And basically it is. Again, based on the quotes that we've read, Salt Lake City was never meant to substitute New Jerusalem in Independence, Missouri. But the city of Salt Lake was patterned after what was supposed to happen, essentially. And what you have here is you have this city block, uh, which the whole thing together we refer to as Temple Square. And then the church purchased this part of Main Street, okay, and made it into a plaza. And then over here is where you have like administrative buildings. You have the church office building, you have the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, which is where the brethren are currently meeting. They've dedicated, I think, the eighth floor. I'm not sure, as like a temporary temple space because they would normally meet every Thursday in the Salt Lake Temple, but they're meeting here right now. You have the administration building, which is like the offices for the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12. This one, I believe, is the Relief Society building. Okay, so it's not a 24 temple complex. There's just one temple here, in a sense, a temporary temple floor. But it's interesting because this kind of resembles what we were just talking about, because the Salt Lake Temple is on the westernmost block out of these two blocks, and it's just front and center. It's the middle one. You know, if you had two more temples right here on either side, that would be temples, 10, 11, and 12. Um, so that's interesting. I didn't realize that Salt Lake followed that pattern even that closely. It's very interesting. So, yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, let's go back. Okay, so we talked about the first three, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, numbers 7, 8, and 9 is called the Sacred Apostolic Repository for the use of the bishop. Now, I'm just going to skim through these and then we'll look at the spreadsheet. Numbers 4, 5, and 6, the Holy Evangelical House for the High Priesthood of the Holy Order of God. Remember, when we're talking about evangelists in the New Testament, that corresponds to the priesthood office of patriarch. Okay, numbers 1, 2, and 3, the house of the Lord for the elders of Zion, an ensign to the nations. Numbers 22, 23, and 24, house of the Lord for the presidency of the high priesthood after the order of Aaron, a standard for the people. So now we're done with this block. Now the ones that I just read are these easternmost, or ones on the far east side, or the most east temples on this eastern block. 22, 23, 24. So now we're talking about the Aaronic priesthood over here. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. Numbers 19, 20, and 21. House of the Lord for the high priesthood after the order of Aaron. The law of the kingdom of heaven. Messenger to the people. Which is, I mean, these are interesting names. I don't really know what to make of it. Numbers 16, 17, and 18. House of the Lord for the teachers in Zion. Messenger to the church. So that's a priesthood office, a teacher, right? And then numbers 13, 14, and 15. House of the Lord for the deacons in Zion. Helps in government. Underneath must be written on each house, holiness to the Lord. And then this says June 24th, 1833. Okay, so this was just 2 years after the site for New Jerusalem was identified. All right, so that's interesting. So, as you can see, it seems like they're kind of like, they're in groups of 3, and they're grouped by like priesthood office, essentially. The presiding buildings seem to be for the, I don't know, the first presidency, maybe the apostles as well. The next one is called the Sacred Apostolic Repository, but it says it's for the use of the bishop. And then the next one after that, the Holy Evangelical House, which this would be the office of patriarch. And then, of course, the house of the Lord for the elders of Zion, which would be elders. So it's like first presidency, maybe apostles. I don't know, because bishop is below patriarch. So I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, maybe apostles and then patriarch and then elders, and then looking at the Aaronic priesthood side over here, you have the presidency of the high priesthood, and then you have kind of like a repetition, house of the Lord for the high priesthood after the order of Aaron, which if I was to guess, I would think that maybe this first set or this second set, 19, 20, and 21, maybe this is for the priests, even though it doesn't say priests. And then the next one is for teachers, and the one after that is for deacons. Um, so it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And I wish I had more detail than that. I'd like to see exactly how everything would be run, uh, what exactly would take place in all these buildings. I mean, some it's not too hard to imagine. It's like whatever's taking place right now, probably like in the administration building, for example. The administration building right here, it's not a temple. It is a very pretty building, and it is temple-like by its appearance, sort of. But maybe once everything is constructed in the way it's supposed to be, we build up the actual city of New Jerusalem. Maybe the first presidency and the apostles and all these general authorities would be operating and doing their work in temples, their administrative work. Does that make sense? So maybe the Relief Society would be in one, and uh, just kind of like, yeah, you get what I mean. You get what I mean. So it's really interesting. Now, there's more. I haven't read really this next part, so this is going to be new to me. Okay, a council of the elders of the church was held at Westfield the same day. Elder Gladden Bishop was president, and Brother Chester L. Heath clerk. Uh, okay, we're going to skip that part. Sounds like church discipline or something like that. Okay, an explanation of the plot, of the plot of the city of Zion, sent to the sent to the brethren in Zion, the 25th of June, 1833. Let me take a look at. Okay, so this larger plot, it says early August, 1833, and then the first one was early June to the 25th of June. So at the time that we're reading this in the Millennial Star, it seems like they're probably operating off of this first plot. Okay. All right. So what's it say? This plot contains 1 mile square. All the squares of the plot contain 10 acres, each being 40 rods square. You will observe that the lots are laid off alternating or off alternating alternately or alternately in the squares, alternately in the squares, in one square running from the south and the north to the line through the center of the square, and in the next, the lots run from east to west to the center line. So I think he's just talking about the fact that, like, you see how these lots, they run north and south, and then these ones east and west. Well, it just kind of like alternates throughout the city. I'm pretty sure that's what he's referring to. Each lot is 4 perches in the front and 20 back, making 1/2 of an acre in each lot. 1.5 acre in each lot. That's about the size of my property. Mine's closer to 2 acres, which is plenty, by the way. If you're worried that that's not, I mean, for some of you, it's not enough, but to have just like a little family homestead, it's fine. I have cows. Right now I have 2 steers, and I could do, maybe like 3, 4, 5 maybe even more if I supplemented with hay. But okay, so that no one street will be built on entirely through the street, but one square the house will stand on one street, and on the next one other, except the middle range of squares, which runs north and south, in which range are the painted squares. The lots are laid off in these squares, north and south, all of them, because these squares are 40 perches by 60, being 20 perches longer than the other, their greatest length being east and west. By running at these squares north and south, it makes all the lots in the city of one size. And yeah, you can see that here. The beauty of this, if you think about it, is that it really speaks to the mind, um, the law of consecration and equality. Um, I have no doubt, there's probably still going to be farmers. You're probably going to have different sizes of property, but in a city, it's just everyone's basically equal. Um, yeah. Okay. That's probably the idea. The painted squares in the middle are for public buildings. The one without any figures is for storehouses for the bishop and to be devoted to his use. Okay. So that's referring to this one right here. Because in this original, let's see. Now with this one, they don't have that. Yeah, so they are going off of the first one. You can see in the revised plat, all you have is the 24 temple complex in the middle, and everything else are these lots for residences. Well, I'm assuming that they're all for residences. I don't know. So maybe they moved that outside the city, but in the original, this was going to be for the storehouse. Okay. And to be devoted to his use. Figure first is for the temples for the use of the presidency. The circles inside of the square are the places for the temples. You will see it contains 12 figures. 2 are for the temples of the lesser priesthood. It is also to contain 12 temples. The whole plot is supposed to contain from 15 to 20,000 people. Uh, you will therefore see that it will require 24 buildings to supply them with houses of worship, schools, etc. And none of these temples are to be smaller than the one of which we send you a draft. This temple is to be built in the square marked figure first, and to be built where the circle is which has a cross on it. On the north and south of the plot where the line is drawn is to be laid off for barns, stables, etc., for the use of the city, so that no barns or stables will be in the city among the houses. The ground to be occupied by these must be laid off according to wisdom. So see, there's like leeway, obviously. It's not like it has to be exactly like this and then you figure it out. It's all done according to practicality. And as you can see, there was a big change going from this original plat to the revised plat. And I'm sure maybe there's going to be differences when this actually comes into fruition, right? Um, there's a lot of questions because, a city is not just residences, right? So I don't know if in the original plan some of these were supposed to be for stores, or if, doing the law of consecration, everyone kind of like produces the works of their own hands, and it's more of like you have like farmers markets, and farmers markets for food, but also for other things as well. I don't know. I don't know. I do think that everything's going to look much, much different than how it is now. I'm not so confident uh, that we're going to continue to have like really big stores like Costco or Walmart or places like that. I mean, we might. I don't know. Or maybe things will just be a lot more simple. Feel free to put in the comments what you think the future is going to look like during the millennium. Do you think that we're still going to do skyscrapers? Or do you think that because things are going to be a lot more equal, there's not going to be so much demand for land, there's not going to be a need for skyscrapers or even really multi-story buildings? You know what I mean? Because that's why it happens, is because uh, you have people that they want to be near a central location, and you run out of room. So what do? You build up. You can't build out anymore. You build up, and so that's what makes skyscrapers. Um, so I don't know. Things could be radically different, but obviously they built this with an 1800s mindset, and I'm not exactly sure how much was by revelation and how much was their own problem solving. But yeah, all I know is that the temples themselves, the dimensions of the temples would have been by revelation. The rest of it, probably very inspired, but who knows? Okay. Okay. The open. Oh, I'm skipping. Okay. On the north and south are to be laid off the farms for the agriculturalist agriculturist and the sufficient quantity of land to supply the whole plot. And if not, and if cannot be laid off without going too great a distance from the city, there must also be some laid off on the east and west. And this square is thus laid off and supplied, lay off another in the same way, and so fill up the world in these last days. And let every man live in the city, for his is the city of Zion. Let every man live in the city, for this is the city of Zion. All the streets are of one width, being 8 perches wide. Also, the space around the outer edge of the painted squares is to be 8 perches between the temple and the street on every side. No one lot in the city is to contain more than one house, and in that to build, in that to be built 25 feet back from the street, leaving a small yard in the front to be planted in a grove according to the taste of the builder, and the rest of the lot for gardens, etc. All the houses to be built of brick and stone. Interesting. The names of the temples to be built, the same as written, June 24th, except a transposition under the numbers 19, 20, and 21. Thus, the house of the Lord, the law of the kingdom of heaven, and messenger to the people, for the high priesthood after the order of Aaron. The scale of the plot is 40 perches to the inch. A description of the house of the Lord, which is to be built first in Zion. Okay, so this is the one. This is the one that the Church of Christ Temple Lot currently possesses. They possess the land where this is supposed to be built. This house of the Lord for the presidency is 87 feet long and 61 feet wide. Oh, see, there you go. Those are the dimensions. Right here. See, this is what the Interpreter Foundation was talking about when they quoted from Alvin R. Dyer's diary. So, the Independence Visitor Center is built according to this specification that we just read. This house of the Lord for the presidency is 87 feet long and 61 feet wide, and 10 feet taken off of the east end for the stairway, leaves the inner court 78 feet by 61, which is calculated and divided for seats in the following manner. The 2 aisles, 4 feet wide each. The middle of the pews are 11 feet 10 inches long and 3 feet wide each. Wow, this is getting really specific. And the 2 lines drawn through the middle are 4 inches apart, in which space a curtain is to drop at right angles and divide the house into 4 parts if necessary. So see, this is, yeah, okay. The pews of the side blocks are 14.5 feet long and 3 feet wide. The 5 pews in each corner of the house are 12 feet 6 inches long. The open spaces between the corner and side pews are for fireplaces. Oh, for fireplaces. Those in the west are 9 feet wide, and the east ones are 8 feet and 8 inches wide. And the chimneys are carried up in the wall where they are marked with a pencil. So let's take a look, because I think I do remember. Oh, okay. I guess it was a false memory. I was gonna say I thought I remember seeing like chimney features over here. I guess not. Not according to this drawing. Um, oh, and by the way, this is interesting. So in the first plat, I don't know if it says it here around the sides. I'm not going to read all that, but on the diagram itself, it doesn't have the names of the roads, but in the revised plat, it does. So this right here would be the center, and the center street that goes north and south is called Chapel Street. Okay. Um, in Salt Lake City, that road is called Main Street. Main Street is 0. Okay. So you can see Main Street is right here. If you go 1 to the east, this would be 100 East, but they call it State Street. Okay. And then if you go further east, then you start to see right here is 200 East or 2nd East, and then 3rd East, and so on. Right. So the 0 point really is right here. The street north of Temple Square is called North Temple, and the street south is called South Temple. Actually, no, sorry, I'm going to correct myself. North Temple would be 100 north, and then north of that, the next street is 200. So you see how that goes? 100, 200. So the 0 point is actually right here. Oh man. Oh, it's coming back. Okay, perfect. It's like right here. And then the South Street is called South Temple, and this would be 0. Okay, because here's 100 South right here. So Main Street and South Temple, that intersection is 0. Okay, so looking at New Jerusalem, and I can only assume that these names are going to stick. They're not going to change. Main Street is Chapel Street. North Temple, if we're thinking about Salt Lake City, would be named Zion Street. South Temple would be Jerusalem Street. Okay, so Chapel Street, Zion Street, Jerusalem Street, and then there are 2 other named streets. This one right here, which would be basically 1st East or 100 East. I think this says Kirtland. This looks like a K, even though there's this weird kind of spot right here. This looks like a K, Irtland, Kirtland Street. Obviously named after Kirtland, Ohio. And then 100 West would be Bethlehem Street. You see that? And then, oh, well, the way that they norm it, the way that, oh my gosh, the way that they call it, the way that they name it, after Zion Street, you would have First Street after that. So Zion Street would not be First Street. First Street would come after Zion Street. So you have First Street North, and then south of Jerusalem Street, you would have First Street South, Second Street South, and so on with all the directions. Okay, so the streets that border the 24 Temple complex have names: Zion, Jerusalem, Chapel, Bethlehem, and Kirtland. It'll be interesting to see if that's what happens in the future, if it keeps these names. Okay. All right. Okay, the pulpit in the west end of the house is to be occupied by the high priesthood as follows. Number 1 is for the president and his council. Number 2 is for the bishop and his council. Number 3 for the high priest. Number 4 for the elders. Each of these are 8 feet long, containing 3 coves or stands for the respective speakers. And those seats opposite them are for visiting officers who are to occupy the seats according to their respective grades. The 2 spaces in the middle are stairs 2 feet wide. The middle pulpit is to be elevated. The first seats, so this kind of sounds like, well, I don't know. The middle pulpit is to be elevated. The first seat's 1 foot, the second 2 feet, the third 3 feet, the fourth 4 feet. In those upon each side are also to be elevated. The first one 8 inches, the second 16, the third 24, the fourth 32. The corner seats are to be occupied by singers and elevated. The first seat 6 inches, the second 12. This is very specific. I'm gonna skip down a little bit. The pulpit in the east end of the house is to be occupied by the lesser priesthood. Oh yeah, so it does. It sounds like the Kirtland Temple, the inside of the Kirtland Temple, and like the Nauvoo Temple and the what do they call it? The Assembly Hall. Um, let's see, Kirtland Temple. See photos. So this is just on Google. I'm hoping somebody has a picture of the inside, please. You guys know what I'm talking about, though. If you've been in the church for a while, you should know what I'm talking about. Let's look at 360s. Okay. Let's look at this one. So you have these pulpits right here. And that's what these initials stand for, is my understanding. I think, for example, this one right here would be for the elders. That's why it has an E. I don't know if it's like Melchizedek, priesthood, elders. I don't know. This one up here is probably for high priest, so it has an H. I'm not exactly sure. Feel free to correct me in the comments below. You'll notice here with the windows, you see how it has like this, like these arching lines right here that intersect. It looks like they wanted to carry that over into the New Jerusalem temples because it has the same type of design right here for the windows. So that's interesting. Okay, so you have that. You have all these different pews. It looks about the same because, like, you see how we were just reading about the elevated seats in the corners? It seems like that's the same in the Kirtland Temple. If you've taken a tour, or if you know, what was this supposed to be for, like a choir, basically? And then there's some over here. It's fascinating. It's such a fascinating thing. By the way, I noticed a very interesting observation about the Kirtland Temple and Nauvoo Temple, where, when you look at them, you'd probably be like, it doesn't really resemble the original temple in Jerusalem, Solomon's temple, the second temple. But there's actually a similarity that you may not be aware of. Let's see. What would I have it at? Let's see, Kirtland Temple. Oh, I did this awesome video. Dang it. Well, if I find it, I'll put it in the description below. Let me do Jerusalem. Yeah, right here. Look, Latter-day Saint helped plan the third temple, unknown chambers, tunnels, second floor. So, yeah, I'll put this in the description below if you missed it. This is a really cool video. And it seems like these temples are architecturally related. There's like a key feature that you may not have thought of. So you may think of the Kirtland Temple, Nauvoo Temple, Salt Lake Temple as just like, oh, these are just like modern temples, modern architecture. but I do not think so. At least like with a couple key. Oh, this is what it's talking about with like the fireplace. It's just like stoves for heat. That's all it is. Okay, not a fireplace. Not like what I was thinking. Obviously, that's probably gonna be changed when they build when they build these temples. I'm sure they'll have modern features. Okay, so pulpit on the east, deacons, teachers, da da da. Um, okay, make your house 14 feet high between the floors. There will not be a gallery, but a chamber, each story to be 14 feet high, arched overhead with an elliptic arch over each of the stories. Let the under part or foundation of the house be of stone. Let it be raised sufficiently high to admit the banking up, so high as to admit the descent every way from the house, so far as to divide the distance between this house and the next to it. Okay. I think I'm pretty much going to end it there. There might be some more interesting things here, but you can check it out yourself. Um, this site is a little bit tricky, by the way. Let me. I got this thing in the way. Okay, let me close out of that. So what you got to do if you're interested in coming here later, um, and I think this works for either desktop or phone. So it'll bring you to this page. But what you got to do, don't click on these arrows because like you'll get down here, you'll read. You're supposed to read page 438, right? So like you look at the page up here, oh, 436, and you would be tempted to click on this arrow. No, click on these arrows right here, and then after that you can scroll down and get to page uh, 438. It's a little bit tricky. Just like scroll down. Okay, so um, it's interesting. It's really interesting to me. I hope it is to you. It's interesting just how similar Salt Lake City is to the original plan. Um, although it, not completely, obviously. Um, looking at independence, who knows how things are going to play out. I do know that the community of Christ, it doesn't seem like they're doing too well as far as like tithing because like the younger generation, they're starting to lose interest in religion, and I think that they're in trouble. Last I checked, I think they're about 250,000 for their membership, and it seems like their doctrine is just kind of getting watered down, and it's going the way of the world. They're adopting worldly philosophies, from what I can tell. Um, there was an interesting video that many of you had pointed out to me where there was a guy that he was like going around, like his channel, he was going around to these different Christian denominations and just like getting a feel for what they're like, how they're different. And he went to the community of Christ. And I think if I remember, he went over here to the Stone Church. This is Community of Christ. And he was sitting in on their meeting, and they were talking about the financial stress that they were experiencing. What he didn't know is if they were just referring to just this congregation's financial stress, or if they were talking about the church as a whole. Let me see if I can find that video. It's really interesting. I was going to do a video about it, but you might as well just watch the video. Community of Christ visitor. Dang it. Let's see. Visiting the community of Christ, traveling preacher. I don't know, something like that. Oh dang. All right. Well, if I find that, then I'll put that in the description. I'm gonna have to search my emails to find it. But anyway, So that's kind of that's an interesting development, regardless of whether he was talking about just that congregation or the church as a whole. So the point is that these properties may come up for sale as the church kind of declines. They've already sold off a bunch of like artifacts and stuff like that to the church. So because they have to maintain their operations, they're not getting enough in tithing income. Um, and then in terms of the Church of Christ Temple lot, I don't know, but I can't imagine that they're doing that well. Just as secularism rises and as all these churches lose their way, essentially, um, it's like they're undoing, you know, because things just get so loose. There's like not really a reason to go to church, and everything's just like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Just be a good person. So we'll just have to see what happens, you know. But the Lord can do anything He wants to. It can happen anytime in any way. It could be in a dramatic way, or it may be a more gradual process. But it's going to happen at some point, you know. But I think the important thing as far as prophecy goes, like I've expressed in previous videos, is that we have this temple in waiting, okay, and that we have the the center stake. This right here is literally the center stake of the church, as far as like because you know I listened to Hiram Andrus, and um, it kind of touched on this a little bit in what we read, but basically the way that cities were going to be built, okay, was you're going to have a stake be a city. Like they talked about the number of like 25 to 30,000 people in here. That's what Hiram Andrus was talking about, the video that I watched. And so basically what you already have here, if you're just looking at membership, you're not looking at streets and houses and properties and stuff like that. What you already have here in Independence is a city. You have the people. You don't have the streets and stuff, but you have the people already there. There's a full size stake in Independence, right? We have a stake center. We have a temple in waiting. So at the very first, okay, it may not be until we're in the first part of the millennium that everything's going to be built up the way that it was originally planned. But at the very least, right now, we have the beginnings of it right here. Right here. And we've looked at the Kansas City area. If you go to the LDS Meeting House locator, let's go to that. Okay. So, oh yeah, we were last looking at Dodge City. We were going through the hypothetical situation of what happens when the cleansing takes place of the earth and all those that remain, the ones that are going to want to join the church. What would that look like? So, you know, looking at the Kansas City area, there's a lot of meeting houses there. There's a lot. You know, here's the one in Independence, but there are a lot of members in the church in this area. If you zoom out even more, you know, I mean, it's all over. You know, compare that to other places, like maybe uh, here we got Jackson, Mississippi. Of course, Jackson's not as large as Kansas City, but here's Birmingham. Let's look at some other. Let's look at Nashville. It doesn't look like Nashville, Tennessee has as many meeting houses as Kansas City. Let's look at Louisville, Kentucky. They don't have as many. Cincinnati. Cincinnati doesn't really have as many. Indianapolis. Nope. I'm just eyeballing it. Hopefully you're able to tell. Like when you look at Kansas City, there are a lot. So we already have a ton of members there. And remember everything that we read in the previous video, that you're not called to come here. Okay. There might be certain people that are asked to come to New Jerusalem, uh, probably general authorities and maybe some other certain people. But you have all these different countries, and therefore you gather to your local stake center. Um, Again, the idea has come up that all the righteous members are going to come to New Jerusalem, and if you believe that, fine, but just like at least like point out somewhere that validates that. I haven't heard anybody say that anywhere ever. In fact, everything that I've looked up has been to the contrary. So anyway, um, yeah, I think that's going to be it for this one. Let me just make sure. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jerusalem in the next video. Here you have the Temple Mount with the Dome of the Rock right here. And then right here is the BYU Jerusalem Center. It's kind of a similar situation, but I'll leave that for, a similar situation to what's going on in Independence, Missouri. But if Independence is going to have, if New Jerusalem is going to have a 24 temple complex, I wouldn't be surprised if Old Jerusalem does too, or something. So if you have your eyes squarely on the third temple, that may not be the only temple that's going to be there. It really may not. We know that the landscape, the geography here is going to change, right? When Christ comes, we at the very least we know that the Mount of Olives right here is going to split in two, right? Furthermore, we know that the entire earth, valleys are going to be raised up, mountains are going to be made low. So, and this is a very hilly, a very like mountainous, hilly area over here in Jerusalem. So it may look quite different. The earth is going to shift. For all we know, who knows? Maybe the BYU Jerusalem Center will come closer. Maybe this will kind of like fill in right here in the Kidron Valley. Don't know. Don't know. A lot of interesting possibilities. Okay, let me just do one last run through of all these tabs. Sometimes I'll have meant to share something, but then I miss it. Okay, there's that. That's what the temples are going to look like, unless further revelation is received. Okay, the revised the revised city plat, the original city plat, the Millennial Star, Orson Pratt's thing, and then there's this. So if you want to be able to just easily look at these temples and what they're supposed to be called, you can go to my spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, the link for it is in the description of each video. What I've done with this spreadsheet is I've brought in all my spreadsheets. Before, I had all these different tabs, and it was getting to be too many tabs. And so I kind of like made separate workbooks by topic. But then I realized if I organize these in alphabetical order, and I use this button right here with the 4 lines, you can easily switch between all these different tabs. Now they're all in alphabetical order. I've renamed some of them. So click on this down here, all sheets, and then you can look at whatever you want. This one's going to be called New Jerusalem 24 Temple Complex, and I need to move that into its right location right after I'm done with this video. Okay, yeah, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.